You create chaotic and toxic classroom dynamics and call it educational equity. Judges grouping children by age in schools instead of competency and intelligence is an arbitrary dictatorship that hurts everyone involved in the educational space. For far too long, the classroom has transformed into a space where comparisons are made inefficiently. It should be a safe space for everyone with different capacities to learn and grow. Before moving on, 4 vital points to crystallize the debate under side proposition. Firstly, let's frame this debate and clarify the burdens under both sides, right? What is the debate about? This debate is about which side convinces you about whether academic streaming is principally the right approach to education and how it affects the quality and outcome of the learning system. Our burden is to prove 2 things here. Firstly, there's an inherent problem with grouping children based on age, hence we need to change the system. But then secondly, the outcome for all actors involved in the educational space with academic streaming will be massively better than the current system. Note that opposition cannot just give you the laundry list of problems with academic streaming for them to win this debate, but they have to compare how grouping students based on age is the best method for all the students. Secondly, let's clarify the model under side proposition, right? What does the world on our side look like? Under our side, we will make sure that students will be grouped into the right category in schools. So 2 things under this. Firstly, there is an assessment method that is both objective and subjective to make sure the result has accurate results and that group actually groups students into the right category. Note that we have the fiat to say here that the results of the test, even though not perfect, are actually still good enough to assess students' capacity. This means that there could be several methods like comprehensive assessments that students will have to take the students' competency and intelligence in various subjects and skills, right? Like sciences, languages, etc. This looks like a specific test that they would be evaluated individually, and their placements would be based on the results of these types of assessments. But then secondly, there will also be an assessment to view the mental readiness of these kids, right? Thirdly, under this, a quick clarification under this, right? Firstly, we will make sure that the schools will provide equal facilities for different kinds of classes. So opposition cannot just debate in the worst case scenario where the low achieving class is going to be just like neglected. The quality of teachers will also be the same. It's just the method of learning and difficulties that will be really different. But lastly, under this, what are proposition's path to victory here? 2 folds. Firstly, why academic streaming is the right form of student allocation. Secondly, academic streaming actually allows students to maximize their potentials better. Done with the setup, let me move on to my 2 fundamental arguments inside my speech. First argument then on the necessity and the urgency of this policy. In this argument, I'm going to cover the principle of education and actually contextualize the dynamics of a classroom that justifies the necessity of this policy. Layer 1 then, under context. I want to know that all children are unique. They all have different capacities and abilities and learning styles that they adapt in their own lives. This means that the current system of education that schools adapt in the current status quo is not a right measure of education because it doesn't acknowledge how students are intrinsically different from one another. Both sides have to understand that just because you're the same age doesn't mean that you have the same level of capabilities and intelligence. This is exactly why in a classroom, right? There's always going to be a disparity between the different students. There's always going to be those who have really low grades and really high ones. So the premise under this is simple. When teachers cannot accommodate the gap between the students, it's going to be harder for them to thrive and grow in terms of their education. So what are the tools of education that's going to cater to the needs of the students? Firstly, education should be personalized. Schools are supposed to educate their children better to enhance their knowledge and prepare them better for the real world in the future. This means that they have to also acknowledge the different types of students that exist within the grounds of the school and why it's so important for them to be able to learn in a more consistent environment. A better education means that you actually recognize and actually accommodate diverse learning styles and needs, and you recognize that each student is actually unique. But then secondly, there should be a relevance in the lives of the students, which means connecting the curriculum content to their own personal real-world experiences. This means it's going to be better for schools to be able to group them into with others with the same intelligence range because then they can resonate better with them. Layer 2 then, why is this so important? Note that because individuals are intrinsically different to one another and they all have different unique capabilities in their lives, different needs and levels of abilities as well, we see that the use of academic streaming can actually provide a more personalized education in terms of a student's needs because they have the ability to adapt to individual students' learning styles and paces. That's going to be better because they're more likely to improve more of the concepts more effectively and stay engaged with their studies, right? Why is this the case? When students are placed in a learning environment that's filled with a lot of knowledge and having to process a lot of information, there's going to be different things that each student is experiencing. what both sides have to understand is the fact not everyone has the same learning pace as others, right? There's the intellectually gifted one and the academically gifted. There's the ones who are more mediocre and the ones who are less achieving and left behind, which means that some students may find learning new things really easy and having the ability to understand it really quickly, and some may need more time to actually process all that sort of information that they have received. There are those who are born smart and are considered geniuses, for example, and those who have a harder time keeping up with their studies. So when you put students who are incredibly smart and advanced in an environment where they have to follow the pacing of the different students who have significantly different capabilities, it's going to be more problematic for both parties. The impacts to this are twofold. Firstly, you're going to drag the advanced kids' progress down. But then secondly, students who cannot match the capabilities of these advanced kids are going to have a harder time following the learning in classrooms, and they're more likely to feel bad about themselves because they don't have the capacity to reach that kind of level in the first place. Moving on to my second argument then, on how this actually improves the learning methods for individuals. First layer under this. Firstly, I want to quickly note the element of primary and secondary school years. Panels, primary and secondary years are crucial years in children's development that actually mold your confidence and also your outlook on life. Why is this the case, right? Because as an individual, you started to understand yourself little by little as you grow older. You started to have the understanding to compare yourself to others who are more significantly different than you. Thus, a fitting environment where you realize that you're not that different in comparison to your peers will result in two exclusive benefits panels. Firstly, you don't feel the alienation if you have a different capacity with your peers. But secondly, you will also have more motivation if you know that people have actual similar struggles with you instead of feeling super different because some kids are way more talented in academics than you. Second layer under this argument then, the three structural reasonings on why this is so. Under our side, right? It automatically means that you tailor their education experiences based on their own needs. Three things that are this. Firstly, when you segregate the different types of educations and place them into a classroom with similar people to them, this means that the advanced students are going to be able to progress at a faster pace, and those who need additional support have more chances of receiving more attention. And so their learning needs would be met, right? But then secondly, this type of academic streaming is going to mitigate frustration and the degradation of self-esteem because it's inherently accommodating towards the different learning speeds. The advanced learners do not have to feel bored because of the slower paced instructions, and the struggling students do not have to worry about sparking resentment towards them and the unnecessary peer pressure that exists within the scope of the classroom, right? This means that you also improve the efficiency for the educational system as a whole because you allow it to progress more based on the needs of the students. But lastly, under this, you make more room for growth at the end of the day because this means that students are going to have more motivation in terms of their learning. This is because they're more likely to feel a better sense of accomplishment, which sparks up a greater desire of learning and higher levels of engagement in the classrooms. What's the way here? You achieve two things under our side. Firstly, students' needs are better accommodated and catered to by the school. Lastly, you give more room for them to grow because they understand their pacing. Proud to propose.